The wedding was meant to be the start of their beautiful journey together, a lavish celebration with hundreds of guests, heartfelt vows, and a picture-perfect setting. But an unexpected gift from the bride's father would turn the happiest day of their lives into a nightmare. Taylor and Alex were born just a few months apart in a luxurious coastal community in Southern California. Their families had long been intertwined, not just through business ventures in real estate and tech, but through a shared history that ran deep in the sun-drenched landscape of Newport Beach. They grew up in a world of privilege, surrounded by success and stability, but for Taylor and Alex, none of that mattered compared to the simple joy of their shared childhood. From the time they were toddlers, they were inseparable. Their mothers, both successful entrepreneurs, frequently arranged playdates, knowing their children adored each other's company. Their fathers, though more traditional, were good-hearted men who often joked that the two were destined for each other long before they could grasp what that meant. Their youth was a whirlwind of fun and adventure. They spent their afternoons chasing each other through the sprawling, manicured gardens of their family estates, their laughter echoing in the sea breeze. When they weren't playing outside, they would sit side by side, lost in books, creating imaginary worlds, or competing fiercely in video games. Taylor, with her naturally competitive spirit, would always demand a rematch. As they grew, their bond deepened in a way that was difficult to explain. At every social gathering, they naturally gravitated toward one another. Their friendship was effortless, built on a foundation of trust and an unspoken understanding. When they started school, their connection became even more apparent. Teachers often praised how well they worked together, perfectly balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. Alex was logical, calm, and methodical, while Taylor was bold, creative, and unafraid of taking risks. When Taylor's attention would drift, doodling in her notebook instead of listening, Alex would gently nudge her back into focus. And when Alex hesitated to speak up, Taylor was his champion, encouraging him to be more confident. By the time they were 10, their friendship was unshakable. They had their disagreements, of course. Alex's practicality often clashed with Taylor's impulsiveness, but their arguments never lasted long. They knew each other too well, and their bond was too precious to let small things get in the way. As they entered their teenage years, something began to shift. It wasn't sudden, but a gradual evolution, a series of small changes they didn't immediately comprehend. Alex noticed the way Taylor's laugh could light up an entire room, the way her nose crinkled adorably when she was annoyed. Taylor, in turn, noticed Alex's growing height, the way his once boyish face was taking on a sharper, more defined shape, and the quiet confidence that gave him a unique charm. Others noticed it too. Their classmates often teased them, asking if they were a couple. At first, they would just laugh it off, but as time went on, the idea didn't seem so funny anymore. By the time they were 16, their relationship had taken on a new dimension, one they hadn't planned but couldn't deny. It was no longer just about friendship. A deeper feeling was taking root. When Taylor stood too close, Alex's heart would race. Taylor, for her part, often found herself watching Alex when he wasn't looking. One evening, after a long study session for their final exams, the two sat together on the roof of Taylor's house, watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink, and the air carried the salty scent of the sea. In that quiet moment, Taylor finally voiced the question that had been lingering between them. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if we were us?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alex turned to her, his brows slightly furrowed. "What do you mean, if we weren't this?" he said, gesturing to the space between them. Alex's heart hammered in his chest. He had thought about it, of course, for a long time, but he had never dared to say it out loud. "Oh," he replied after a moment. "I think about it." Taylor searched his face, and whatever she saw there seemed to be the answer she was looking for. She smiled, a soft, hesitant smile, full of that same unspoken understanding, and before either of them could overthink it, she leaned in and pressed a light, fleeting kiss on his lips. In that instant, everything changed. A simple childhood friendship had blossomed into a profound love, something neither of them had expected but both wholeheartedly embraced. As they navigated the rest of their teenage years, their relationship only grew stronger. They were still best friends, each other's biggest supporters, but now they were more. Together, they learned the meaning of true love. Of course, it wasn't always easy. Not everyone believed they would last. Some said it was just a youthful romance, that they would eventually grow apart. But Taylor and Alex didn't listen. They knew what they had was real, and they refused to let others dictate their future. When they graduated from high school, they were already making plans not just for their individual ambitions, but for the life they wanted to build together. They proved that a simple friendship could indeed grow into a lifelong love. And when they were both accepted to universities in Los Angeles, it felt like fate confirming what they already knew, another sign that they were meant to continue their journey together. As they stepped into their adult lives, they had no doubts. Whatever the future held, they would face it as one. But they had no idea just how severely their love would be tested in the years to come. As Taylor and Alex navigated the world of adulthood, they carried a clear vision for their future. Their dreams had been shaped over years, carefully forged since childhood. They were no longer just friends who had fallen in love. They were individuals with towering ambitions, determined to make a significant impact in their respective fields. Their transition from high school to university only strengthened their bond. Unlike many young couples who struggled with the newfound freedom and challenges of college life, they thrived. Though they attended different universities in Los Angeles, their connection remained steadfast. Alex enrolled in a prestigious architecture program at USC, immersing himself in the world of design, while Taylor specialized in fashion at FIDM, focusing on sustainable luxury inspired by the natural beauty of the California coast, mixed with modern elegance. Despite their demanding academic schedules, they always made time for each other. Weekends became their sanctuary, filled with road trips up the coast, exploring new restaurants in the city, or simply talking for hours about their future. They faced every challenge together, supporting each other through sleepless nights, the intense pressure of their studies, and the trials of their burgeoning dreams. As their studies progressed, so did their reputations. Alex's professors quickly recognized his exceptional talent, a rare fusion of innovation and a deep respect for architectural history. He wasn't just designing buildings, he was creating legacies. By his final year, he had secured a coveted internship at one of the top architectural firms in the country. Taylor, meanwhile, was experiencing a meteoric rise of her own. By her sophomore year, she had started designing and selling custom pieces, using Instagram to showcase her creations. It wasn't long before influencers and industry experts took notice of her bold yet elegant designs. In her third year, she interned at a renowned fashion house, and her designs began earning accolades at emerging designer showcases. Taylor was fearless, unafraid to challenge industry norms, and determined to make a name for herself in the world of fashion. Through it all, their love remained the constant. They grew together, evolving over time and embracing the natural progression of their relationship. But one question lingered. When would they take the next step? Taylor loved Alex deeply, but she wasn't ready for marriage just yet. She had seen too many young women's ambitions stifled by societal expectations. She was determined to prove herself, to stand on her own 2 feet, before she became anyone's wife. Alex understood this, even if, deep down, he craved the certainty of a lifelong commitment, so he waited, knowing the right time would come. Taylor had long dreamed of visiting Big Sur, drawn to its dramatic landscapes and rugged beauty. When she suggested the trip, Alex knew this was the moment. He had been carrying the engagement ring for weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Their trip was a dream. They stayed at a stunning eco-lodge perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the vast Pacific, where the ocean met the sky in a seamless expanse of blue. Their mornings were spent hiking through redwood forests, their afternoons relaxing by an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the horizon, and their evenings under a canopy of stars. Taylor was radiant, capturing the beauty around her in photographs and sketching designs inspired by the vibrant nature. Alex watched her, his heart swelling with love. He knew there was no other woman he wanted to spend his life with. On their 4th night, he decided the time was right. He arranged for a private dinner on a terrace overlooking the ocean. Candles flickered in the cool breeze, and the sound of crashing waves below provided a magical soundtrack. As they talked, Taylor was full of passion, speaking about her plans for the future, her collections, the direction of her brand. Alex listened quietly, his heart pounding as he mentally rehearsed his words. He reached for her hand. "Taylor," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion welling inside him. "I love you. I always have. We grew up together, we built our dreams side by side, and I know, without a single doubt, that you are my future." Taylor gasped as she saw him slowly get down on one knee. The ring Alex presented was breathtaking, a custom-designed piece that blended modern elegance with timeless meaning. A brilliant diamond was set in a delicate band designed to look like intertwined waves, symbolizing unity and eternity. She brought her hands to her chest. "I'm not rushing you," Alex continued, his voice thick with sincere love. "I know you're the woman I want to spend my life with. Whether it's now, a year from now, or 10 years from now, I'll wait. But if you're ready, I want to be your husband." For the first time in her life, Taylor was speechless. She had imagined this moment, but she was unprepared for the overwhelming wave of emotion that washed over her. In Alex's eyes, she saw her future clear, certain, and filled with love. Tears streamed down her face, and a trembling laugh escaped her lips. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. The world around them faded away as Alex slipped the ring onto her finger, as she fell into his arms, as their lips met under the endless California sky. They were surrounded by the sounds of nature, the sigh of the wind, the distant calls of seabirds. In that moment, it felt as if the universe had conspired to make everything perfect. That night, they held hands and talked about their future. They planned the wedding, the places they would travel, the family they would build. Their dreams stretched beyond the present, filled with adventure, love, and a promise that was meant to last a lifetime. They didn't know the trials that were to come, but in that moment, it didn't matter. They had committed to each other, a promise they never intended to break. The next morning, Taylor awoke still feeling like she was in a beautiful dream. The engagement ring on her finger glittered in the first golden rays of the California sun, a reflection of the overwhelming joy that filled her. She turned to Alex, who was sleeping peacefully beside her, his breathing soft and even. She stayed there for a moment, letting the reality of it all sink in. They were engaged, no longer just childhood sweethearts, no longer just two ambitious souls, but a couple promised to forever. When Alex finally woke, the first thing he saw was Taylor's radiant smile, her eyes still warm with the happiness of the previous night. They spent the morning in quiet bliss, knowing their world was about to explode with excitement and the chaos of wedding preparations. When they returned to Los Angeles, they were met with an outpouring of love and excitement. Friends and family showered them with congratulations, and their parents, who had long hoped for this day, wasted no time in celebrating. An intimate gathering was arranged to honor their engagement, filled with laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and stories that traced their journey as a couple. At one point, Alex's mother pulled Taylor aside, holding her hands tightly, her face beaming with tears in her eyes. "I always knew this day would come," she whispered, her voice full of pride. But the quiet celebration quickly gave way to the intense process of wedding planning. Taylor and Alex, both driven and purposeful, approached it with the same vigor they applied to their careers. This wouldn't just be a luxurious wedding. It had to be a true reflection of their love, their culture, and their story. The first big decision was the venue. They wanted a place that was not only beautiful but held a deeper meaning. After weeks of searching, they found it. An exclusive estate perched atop a cliff in Malibu, commanding a breathtaking view of the Pacific Ocean. Here, where dramatic cliffs met the endless blue waves, surrounded by lush nature, they felt it was the perfect place, timeless and eternal, just like their love. As they walked through the estate, Taylor could already envision the exact scene of their wedding. The ceremony would be held in an open-air courtyard, where guests would be seated under a canopy of white roses. The reception would be in a grand glass pavilion, its walls reflecting the golden glow of the setting sun. As they stood on the terrace, feeling the salty air from the ocean, Alex squeezed Taylor's hand. They both knew this is where their forever would begin. With the venue secured, the meticulous planning began. No detail was spared. Their wedding was to be a masterpiece, blending their shared history with modern elegance. Taylor, a perfectionist, became consumed with every element. Her wedding dress was to be designed by one of Los Angeles' most prestigious designers, featuring intricate lacework and a silhouette that was both classic and contemporary. Alex, though less concerned with the minute details, had a clear vision for the wedding's atmosphere. He wanted everyone to feel the warmth of their love and the presence of the people who had shaped their lives. The guest list quickly grew, expanding from close family and friends to prominent figures in the worlds of fashion and architecture. The wedding was no longer just a private celebration. It became a highly anticipated event. Articles appeared in society magazines, interviews were given about their love story, and there was buzz about how their wedding would be a symbol of love and legacy coming together. But amidst the excitement, the pressure mounted. Taylor found herself buried in endless decisions, floral arrangements, menu tastings, seating charts. There were nights she felt overwhelmed, consumed by anxiety about whether everything would be perfect. In every moment of exhaustion, Alex was there, holding her hand, reminding her to breathe, to rest, and to remember what truly mattered. It wasn't about the grand wedding, it was about their love. In the midst of the chaos, they found peace in the small moments. Late at night, after a day of relentless planning, they would sit together on their balcony, watching the city lights of LA twinkle below. There, they would talk about life after the wedding, the home they would design together, the places they would travel, the family they would start. Alex would often tease her, saying he was letting her make all the decisions because, in the end, all that mattered to him was seeing her walk down the aisle. The night before the wedding arrived, as per tradition, they were to spend it apart, but sleep eluded them both. In the middle of the night, they found themselves on the phone, whispering into the quiet darkness. They laughed, in disbelief at how their childhood friendship had led them to this very moment. In the middle of their conversation, Taylor said that no matter how beautiful or grand the wedding was, the only part she was truly waiting for was the walk toward him, because that was all that ever really mattered. On the other end of the line, Alex's voice was soft and full of love. I have never been more sure of anything in my entire life. The morning of their wedding arrived with the first golden rays of sun touching the Santa Monica Mountains, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of salt from the ocean below. One by one, the guests began to arrive, their voices blending into a happy murmur of laughter and anticipation as they filled the courtyard. The atmosphere was electric, with hope and excitement. In separate suites, Taylor and Alex prepared for the most important moment of their lives. Taylor's gown was ethereal, a masterpiece that shimmered with every movement, adorned with delicate embroidery that told a story of modern romance. As she stood before the mirror, her mother gently adjusted her veil, her eyes glistening with emotion. No words were spoken, but the moment was enough to convey the length of the journey Taylor had taken to reach this day. In another part of the estate, Alex stood before a mirror, adjusting his custom tuxedo. He stared at his reflection, his heart beating a powerful rhythm, not of nervousness, but of the sheer gravity of the moment. A hand on his shoulder from his best man broke him from his reverie. "Ready, man?" Their eyes met in the mirror, and for the first time, a completely certain smile spread across Alex's face. As the ceremony was about to begin, the guests settled into their seats under the canopy of white roses. A hush fell over the crowd, replaced by a palpable sense of anticipation. The music began. The large doors at the end of the aisle slowly opened, and Taylor appeared. In an instant, the world fell away. The grand venue, the hundreds of eyes on them, the months of meticulous planning, all of it vanished. There was only this moment. Holding her bouquet of white orchids, Taylor took a step forward, a profound sense of certainty in her heart. The soft murmurs of the guests, the distant sound of the string quartet, it all faded into the background. At the end of the aisle, Alex was waiting, and that simple thought warmed her entire being. This was the life she had dreamed of, the moment she had imagined for so long. At the other end of the aisle, in the courtyard, Alex was surrounded by his groomsmen. He was used to pressure. He had presented grand architectural designs and navigated high-stakes projects, but nothing had ever felt like this. His father had visited him earlier, offering quiet but meaningful advice. His best man had tried to make him laugh, to ease the tension, but it wasn't nerves. It was an indescribable feeling of certainty. He always knew this day would come. He had never doubted his love for Taylor, but now that the moment was here, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the lifelong promise they were about to make. The courtyard was a masterpiece of beauty. Guests were seated under the open sky, framed by long rows of vibrant flowers, with an endless vista of the ocean below. The golden light of the setting sun enveloped the scene, casting a magical glow. The sea breeze carried the faint sound of the waves, a steady rhythm that mirrored the beating of Alex's heart. And then, the moment came. The music swelled, the grand doors opened, and everything stopped as Taylor appeared. Backlit by the sun, her form haloed in an almost divine light. Time seemed to slow. Each step she took was filled with purpose, her veil flowing behind her like a whisper on the wind. Alex's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't just beautiful, She was his entire world. Taylor barely noticed the admiring gasps of the guests or the collective intake of breath as she emerged. Her eyes were fixed only on Alex, the boy from her childhood, her guide, her one true love. With every step that brought her closer to him, all the fears and anxieties about the future melted away. By her side, her father walked with quiet pride, his hand holding her arm firmly. He had been quiet all morning, watching Taylor with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, but now she knew. It was the bittersweet moment of a father letting his daughter walk toward her new life. When they reached the altar, her father turned to Alex, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, he gave a slight nod of approval before stepping away. The ceremony began. The officiant's voice washed over the crowd, but for Taylor and Alex, all sound had faded. Their world had shrunk to the space between them, the warmth of their hands meeting, the promises that didn't need to be spoken because they were already in their eyes. Then came the moment for their vows. Taylor took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she held Alex's hands. Her voice, though emotional, remained steady. She spoke of how Alex had been her foundation since childhood, how through every triumph and trial, he had never wavered, never asked for more than she could give. She promised that no matter what happened, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always choose him. They had no idea how soon that vow would be tested. At the altar, blissfully unaware, Taylor and Alex continued as Alex recited his own vows, his voice full of promise and adoration. The peace of the ceremony was about to be shattered, and in an instant, the day that was meant to be the beginning of their forever would suddenly change in a way they could never have imagined. The evening was a perfect dream, a love story set against a backdrop of golden light, song, laughter, and endless joy. The guests celebrated under glittering chandeliers, the glass walls of the grand pavilion reflecting the light shimmering on the ocean below. But in the midst of the bliss, an unexpected gift arrived. In the center of the room, Taylor's father stood, a fond but meaningful smile on his face. His presence silenced the joyful noise as all the guests turned to him. "Tonight," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "is not just a wedding night, but a night we will remember forever." A hush fell as the large doors to the terrace slowly opened. Outside, on the estate's private helipad, a sleek black and gold helicopter waited, its rotor blades seemingly frozen in time, ready for a journey none of them would ever forget. Taylor's eyes widened in surprise. She turned to Alex, her face a mask of astonishment. "Dad? What is this?" she whispered, barely able to believe it. Her father smiled and gave a slight nod. "A gift to start your new life, an evening flight along the coast, a moment of peace before the world returns to you." A cheer erupted from the guests, a mixture of excitement and awe. Alex, after a moment of stunned silence, let out a soft laugh and shook his head. "This is like a dream," he murmured to Taylor. "But it's real," she replied, squeezing his hand as they were guided toward the helicopter. Taylor's father faced Alex, his hand landing firmly on the young man's shoulder. "Take care of her," the older man said. It was not a request, but a command, a prayer, a transference of trust. Alex nodded deeply. "Always." For one last time, they turned to their guests, to the flickering candles, to the world of love they were leaving below. In a moment, they were airborne, ascending into the quiet of the night, over the glittering coastline, under an endless sky. The world below looked like a toy set, tiny lights dancing in the dark. The sea was a vast blanket of silver. Taylor leaned her head on Alex's shoulder, letting the cool air whip through her hair. "This is incredible," she whispered. Alex kissed her forehead. "Not as incredible as you." But the peace didn't last. A sharp gust of wind suddenly shook the helicopter, as if something had snatched it from the air. Taylor gripped Alex's arm. What was that? The pilot, who had been calm until now, spoke into their headsets. "Just a sudden gust. Nothing to worry about." But moments later, a more violent jolt rocked them. The entire aircraft tilted precariously, a hint of something they couldn't comprehend. The pilot spoke again, his tone sharper now. "We seem to have an unexpected crosswind. We'll need to be careful." Alex took Taylor's hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "Don't worry," he said, but even in his own voice, there was a faint tremor of doubt. And then, a loud alarm blared through the cockpit. "Warning. System failure." Lights flashed across the control panel, the sound of the alarm screaming through the cabin. "Something's happening," Taylor whispered, her chest tight with fear. The pilot, now gripping the controls tightly, his voice strained with tension, yelled, "We have a problem! The wind is getting stronger! We're losing control!" Alex and Taylor looked at each other, their eyes mirroring the same terror, the same surrender to a situation they could not escape. The helicopter shuddered again, this time more violently, as if something were pulling it down. "Alex!" Taylor gasped as the aircraft plunged into a steeper angle. The ocean, which had been gently lapping below, now swirled in their vision like a waiting beast. A desperate voice filled their headsets. "We need to land! Now!" But there was no time. A loud tearing sound ripped through the air. The rotor blades seemed to scream before they snapped, and in an instant, they were falling. Alex pulled Taylor into his arms, his body shielding her, pushing her away from what was to come. He heard himself shouting her name, but the sound was lost in the roar of the wind, the shriek of the alarms, the accelerating descent of their world. And then, a violent impact. Blackness. Silence. The once perfect night of love had become a night of loss. And in the space between the water and the dark sky, between life and death, the promise they had made just hours before was tested again. But this time, there was no certainty they would be able to fulfill it together. The ground rushed up too fast, too suddenly. There was no time to think, no time to scream, only the deafening roar of the wind, the flashing red warning lights, and the crushing realization that this was not how their night was supposed to end. And then, impact. The world exploded into chaos the moment the helicopter slammed into the jagged cliffside. A violent boom shattered the night's silence, the sickening crunch of twisting metal, the horrifying shriek of shattering rotors, the sharp crack of splintering glass, all merging into one horrific crescendo. The once graceful flight had become a nightmare. In the final second before the crash, Alex did the only thing he could. He wrapped himself around Taylor, his body a shield as the world collapsed around them. The force of the collision tore the aircraft apart. The front windshield imploded, sending shards of glass flying through the cabin. The now useless rotor blades sliced through the air before folding into a heap of mangled metal. The tail of the helicopter crumpled like paper, and the ruptured fuel tank ignited on impact. A fiery explosion erupted in the darkness, sending a plume of thick black smoke into the sky. And then, silence. A heavy, terrifying silence fell over the wreckage, the kind of quiet that only follows utter devastation. The cool, fresh night air turned hot and acrid as flames greedily consumed what was left of the aircraft, painting the darkness with an eerie light. The smoke swirled through the twisted pieces, a dark omen against the flickering flames. The downed helicopter came to rest on a treacherous ledge. Half of it braced against the rock face, while the other half dangled over the edge of a sheer cliff where the sea below churned angrily. The once luxurious aircraft groaned under its own weight, shifting precariously, threatening to plunge into the abyss at any moment. Inside the mangled metal, something stirred. A faint sound, barely a whisper against the crackling fire. Taylor. A low moan of pain escaped her lips as consciousness slowly returned. Her body was a symphony of agony and confusion. A sharp, throbbing pain radiated through her head, making it difficult to think. Warm blood trickled down her forehead, stinging her eyes as she tried to piece together what had happened: the wedding, the reception, the helicopter, the fall. Alex! A sharp terror pierced through the fog in her mind. She tried to move her head, but every motion sent a fresh wave of pain through her body. Her limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if her own body had betrayed her. She held her breath and forced her trembling fingers to move, reaching into the thick, smoky air. Her hand brushed against something solid, warm, familiar. Alex. He was slumped against the broken seat, his face covered in blood and soot. His once pristine white tuxedo was shredded, stained with dirt and blood. He was breathing faintly, unevenly. He was alive. A wave of hope washed over Taylor, but it was immediately replaced by sheer panic. Their situation was growing more dire by the second. The fire behind them was consuming the rest of the helicopter. Sparks from frayed wires spat onto the damp ground. The wrecked aircraft shifted again, the metal beneath them groaning as it threatened to give way. If they didn't move now, they would either burn alive or fall to their deaths. She forced herself to reach for Alex, every movement like 1,000 knives tearing at her flesh. But she didn't stop. She crawled toward him, driven by a desperate determination. Alex. Her voice was a hoarse whisper. She grabbed him, shaking his shoulders as much as her weakened body would allow. "Wake up!" For an agonizing moment, he didn't move. Then, finally, his eyes fluttered open. A low groan escaped his lips. "Taylor." His voice was faint, distant, as if each word was an immense effort. His hand moved, trying to reach for her, but it seemed to disobey his command. Tears filled her eyes. She shook him more firmly. "You have to wake up, Alex. We have to get out of here." But before she could finish, the wrecked helicopter groaned again, a long, terrifying screech that sent a new wave of fear through her. They were running out of time. If they didn't act now, there would be no escape. She felt the ground shift beneath them. A slow, sickening scrape of metal against rock sent a jolt of terror through Taylor's chest. The wreckage was sliding, inching closer to the edge of the cliff. If they didn't move now, there would be no saving them. Summoning the last reserves of strength in her battered body, she hooked her arms under Alex's and began to drag him away, toward the shattered side of the cabin where the fuselage had been ripped open in the crash. Each movement sent searing pain through her ribs. Each breath was a torment. Behind her, the fire raged, its heat licking at her skin, pushing her forward. The air was thick with suffocating smoke, burning her throat. Her lungs screamed for relief, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Alex was barely conscious, his body a dead weight in her arms. As they crawled away, he seemed to grow heavier. His faint moans of pain were the only sign he was still alive. But he had no strength to fight. Too weak, too close to the edge of oblivion. With one final desperate effort, Taylor pulled them out of the collapsing aircraft. Just as their bodies cleared the wreckage, a second explosion rocked the cliffside. The force of the blast threw them down the slope, tearing Alex from her grasp. Taylor barely registered the pain before she slammed into a sharp rock. The impact stole her breath. Dazed and gasping, she forced herself to crawl back. "Alex!" Her heart stopped when she saw him, just a few feet away. He wasn't moving. Ignoring the pain in her own body, she scrambled to his side, her hands trembling as she pressed them to his chest. There was a pulse, faint, but there. His breathing was shallow, but it was there. Tears blurred her vision as she cupped his face. "Stay with me, Alex," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, just stay with me." Above them, the helicopter wreckage groaned one last time. In a final, deafening shriek of metal, what was left of the aircraft gave way to gravity. It plunged over the cliff, and she barely had time to react before it exploded as it hit the ocean below, a fireball that tore through the night's darkness. The cliffside shook, sending a powerful spray of water against the rocks. And then, silence. A deafening, suffocating silence. But Taylor didn't notice. All her attention was on Alex, on the slight rise and fall of his chest, the pale color of his face beneath the streaks of blood. She rested her forehead against his, trying to will him back to her. In the distance, faintly on the wind, were sirens. Help was coming. But as she looked at Alex, as his body grew heavier in her arms, she wasn't sure it would come soon enough. Behind them, the fire continued to burn, its heat a constant presence on her back as she held Alex tightly, as if her grip alone could keep him from slipping away. Alex stirred, his fingers twitching in her weak grasp. "Taylor." His voice was barely a whisper, faint and breaking. Taylor's tears fell onto his cheek. "Stay with me," she pleaded, holding his face more firmly, her thumb stroking the dried blood at his temple. "Please, don't leave me." His eyes fluttered, his gaze unfocused, shifting between her and the dark abyss that threatened to swallow them. And then, another shift, a deep, terrifying groan of metal and rock. The last piece of the helicopter wreckage, clinging to the cliff edge, was about to give way. They were too close. Taylor moved, trying to lift Alex again, wrapping her arms under his shoulders. Every movement was a war against exhaustion, against the searing pain of her wounds, against the force pulling them toward the cliff's edge. "Alex." She tried to get him to his feet, but he collapsed against her again, his body too heavy, too weak. He was fading. The collapsing wreckage threatened one last time. "Alex." His breathing stopped for a moment, then returned, shallow and ragged. "It's okay," she whispered desperately. "It's not," he answered faintly, his voice barely audible over the crackling flames. He closed his eyes, tightening his grip on her hand. "We're going to get out of this, you understand? We're going to be safe. We'll fix this." his lips parted slightly, his breath trembling. "I love you." And everything inside her broke. "Don't you do that?" she sobbed, her words barely coherent. "Don't you say goodbye. We're going to make it. Please, fight." But the mountain had other plans. A sudden, violent shudder beneath them. The rock gave way, and in one horrifying moment, there was nothing but the feeling of weightlessness, of falling, the air rushing past them as gravity pulled them down into the depths. Her fingers were still locked with Alex's as they fell together into the darkness, the burning wreckage shrinking in her vision above. And then, impact. A brutal collision against the hard rock. The force knocked the air from her lungs, the pain tearing through every fiber of her being. Below, the world churned. The sea roared, the waves crashing against the steep rocks as if in mourning. Above, thick smoke from the burning wreckage ascended into the sky, the last trace of a night that should have never ended this way. And in the distance, the sirens wailed too late, too far away. Fate had already been decided. Taylor's body lay lifeless amidst the shattered remains of the tragedy. Her once pristine wedding dress was torn and stained with blood and ash, the delicate fabric that had once flowed with grace now clinging tightly to her form, a soft whisper against the cold, unforgiving rock. Her dark, curly hair, once carefully styled, was now matted with soot and dust spread across the stones. Her fingers remained curled, as if in her final moments she had been reaching for something or someone. Not far away, Alex's body was sprawled awkwardly on the sharp ground, his arms outstretched as if he were still trying to protect her, even in death. His tuxedo, once a symbol of luxury and new beginnings, was tattered and barely recognizable, marred by dirt and blood. His chest was still. His last breath had been taken long before the first responders reached the top of the cliff. The silence of the night returned. Above them, the bright searchlights cut through the smoke, illuminating the devastating scene. Rescue teams moved quickly, their voices crackling over the radio, but as they reached the cliff's edge, their pace slowed. Most of the wreckage had already fallen into the abyss. Only the bodies left behind told the full story of the tragedy. As they faced the grim reality, a final message echoed over the radio, a statement that would shake the world. No survivors. Back at the wedding estate, where laughter and music had filled the air just hours before, the news spread like wildfire. Gasps of shock turned into screams of anguish. Disbelief morphed into an immeasurable pain. Mothers collapsed. Fathers clutched their chests, trying to contain the agony that was tearing them apart. Friends held onto each other, their hands trembling, unable to comprehend how a night of love and celebration had ended in a tragedy beyond measure. Taylor's father stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe under the weight of his loss. His wife's wails pierced the night, a sound so full of grief, so raw, so intense, that it would forever be etched in the hearts of anyone who heard it. Alex's parents, once beaming with pride, clung to each other, their sorrow reflected in the shattered dreams of their son. Amidst the scattered flower petals and half-empty champagne glasses, the remnants of a future that would never come remained a love that was meant to last a lifetime, extinguished in a single, fiery instant. Below, on the silent mountain, a piece of fabric gently floated on the wind. Taylor's veil, torn in the fall, drifted weightlessly, a final whisper of the life and love that had once burned so brightly. It slowly descended, coming to rest among the wildflowers that grew in the cracks of the rock.